The story of the Ottoman Empire begins not with cannons at Constantinople, but in the rugged landscapes of Anatolia, a region that for centuries had been a crossroads of civilizations. Following the decline of the mighty Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, a power vacuum emerged, leaving a patchwork of fragmented Turkish principalities known as beyliks. This was a land shaped by both the ancient Byzantine legacy and the fierce nomadic traditions of the Turkic peoples, a crucible where a new power would be forged from the remnants of empires past. The Seljuk Sultanate, once a dominant force, had been weakened by internal conflicts and the relentless pressure of Mongol invasions, which shattered its centralized authority and scattered its components across the Anatolian plateau. This period of fragmentation, roughly spanning the late 13th century, was a time of both peril and opportunity. Dozens of small states, each with its own ruler, army, and ambitions, vied for supremacy in a chaotic geopolitical landscape. To the west lay the remnants of the Byzantine Empire, a civilization in slow and steady decline, its borders contracting and its power dwindling. This frontier, a place of constant skirmishes and shifting allegiances, was a magnet for warriors and tribes seeking wealth, glory, and new lands. It was in this fertile ground of conflict and cultural exchange that the seeds of a new empire were sown. The beyliks, though sharing a common Turkic heritage, were distinct in their military strategies, economic foundations, and political aspirations. Some were coastal states with ambitions of naval power, while others were mountain strongholds that controlled vital trade routes. The beylik from which the Ottomans would emerge was not the largest nor the wealthiest, but it possessed a unique advantage. It was positioned directly on the Byzantine frontier, a place where the constant struggle for survival and expansion honed a fierce and disciplined warrior culture. This was the Anatolian crucible, a land of ancient secrets and new beginnings, waiting for a force to unify its disparate parts and project its power onto a world stage. The nomadic traditions of the Turkic peoples, with their emphasis on mobility, horsemanship, and tribal loyalty, provided a powerful foundation for a military state. But it was the integration of these traditions with the administrative and cultural legacies of the Byzantine and Seljuk empires that would give the Ottomans their enduring strength and shape. From one of the smallest and most obscure of these beyliks emerged Osman I, a warrior chieftain of the K tribe. His domain, nestled on the frontier between the Byzantine and Seljuk worlds, demanded mobility, adaptability, and martial prowess. The early years of his rule, marked by cautious expansion and strategic alliances, established the foundational principles that would guide his successors for centuries. Osman's beginnings were humble, and his early campaigns were more akin to large-scale raids than systematic conquests. He and his small band of followers, driven by the Gaza ethos, the pursuit of holy war against infidels, gained fame and a growing following. These early warriors, known as Ghazi, were drawn not only by religious fervor, but also by the promise of plunder and new lands to settle. This fusion of religious zeal and material incentive created a highly motivated and expansionist military force. Osman's genius lay not in brute force, but in his strategic vision. He understood that a small state could not survive through constant warfare alone. He forged alliances with neighboring beyliks and, crucially, with some local Byzantine lords who were willing to align themselves with him against Constantinople's distant and ineffective rule. His diplomacy was as sharp as his sword, allowing him to expand his territory not through singular, massive battles, but through a steady and relentless process of conquest and consolidation. The capture of key fortresses like Bilecik and Znik gave him control over vital trade routes and agricultural lands, transforming his small beylik from a frontier post into a regional power. As his territory grew, so too did the sophistication of his governance. He began to develop a rudimentary administrative system, appointing judges and administrators to govern the newly conquered lands. This early period was not about building a vast and complex empire, but about laying the groundwork for one. Osman's leadership, his ability to inspire loyalty among his followers, and his practical approach to both warfare and governance created a legacy that would be carried forward by his descendants. The principles of his rule expansion, adaptability, and the integration of diverse peoples would become the hallmarks of the great empire that would one day bear his name. Osman's successor, Orhan, transformed the small beylik into a formidable state. He systematically captured key Byzantine cities and fortresses in Anatolia, building the first organized military forces and developing a rudimentary yet effective administrative system. His rule demonstrated that the nascent Ottoman state was more than a mere tribal confederation. It was a political entity with a vision of territorial consolidation. Orhan's reign was a crucial period of transition, where the ad hoc warrior culture of the early beylik began to evolve into a more structured and professional state. He captured the city of Bursa, making it the first Ottoman capital and a center of administration and commerce. The fall of Bursa was not merely a military victory, it was a psychological milestone that showed the Ottomans were capable of taking and holding major urban centers. Orhan's administrative innovations included the establishment of a formal coinage system, a clear symbol of sovereignty. He also began to organize the military into a more disciplined and permanent force. The early Ottoman army was primarily composed of tribal levies and ghazis, who fought for a season and then returned to their lands. Orhan, recognizing the need for a standing army, began to professionalize his forces, creating the first infantry and cavalry units that were paid a regular salary and were loyal directly to the Sultan. These early units, the precursors to the later Janissaries, were a crucial step towards building a military machine capable of sustained conquest. In his quest for power, Orhan also proved to be a shrewd diplomat and an opportunist. He married a Byzantine princess, Theodora Cantacuzene, creating a powerful alliance that gave him an intimate understanding of the Byzantine court's internal conflicts. This relationship, along with his military successes, positioned him as a major player in Anatolian politics. The acquisition of Izmit and Znik further solidified Ottoman control over northwestern Anatolia, effectively isolating the Byzantine heartland and setting the stage for their eventual leap into Europe. Orhan's reign was a testament to the idea that a successful state needed more than just a powerful army. It required a stable capital, a sound economy, and a vision of institutional permanence. His actions laid the administrative, economic, and military foundations of the empire that would carry his family's name. The Ottomans' first major step into Europe was the acquisition of Gallipoli, a strategically vital peninsula on the Dardanelles. This gave them a permanent foothold in the Balkans, a move that was both a military triumph and a psychological turning point. The crossing of the Hellespont was a clear statement that Ottoman ambitions extended far beyond the Anatolian plateau. The Byzantine Empire, weakened by years of civil war and internal strife, was unable to maintain control over its territories. In 1354, a catastrophic earthquake destroyed the walls of Gallipoli, and the Ottoman forces, led by Orhan's son Suleiman Pasha, seized the opportunity. The acquisition of this key peninsula which controlled the sea lanes between the Aegean and the Black Sea, was a military masterstroke. It provided the Ottomans with a secure base of operations and a gateway to the rich, but politically fragmented, lands of the Balkans. From Gallipoli, the Ottomans began a systematic process of expansion into what would become known as Rumelia. Their armies, a mix of light cavalry and disciplined infantry, moved swiftly through the region, capturing key fortresses and towns. The local Bulgarian and Serbian rulers, constantly at war with each other, were unable to form a united front against the new threat. The Ottomans, employing a strategy of divide and conquer, often played one Christian lord against another, making treaties and alliances that suited their own expansionist goals. This period saw the first large-scale migrations of Ottoman settlers from Anatolia into the Balkans, a demographic shift that solidified their presence in the region. Farmers, craftsmen, and administrators followed the armies, establishing new communities and integrating with the local populations. This process was not merely a military occupation, but a profound social and cultural transformation. The Ottomans, through a policy of pragmatic administration and religious tolerance, were often seen as a preferable alternative to the rule of corrupt and oppressive local lords. Their tax system, though heavy, was often more predictable and fair. The acquisition of Gallipoli and the subsequent establishment of a permanent presence in Europe fundamentally altered the trajectory of the Ottoman state. It was no longer a small beylik in Anatolia. It was an intercontinental power, poised to challenge the established order of the Christian world. Under the guidance of Murad I, the Ottoman military machine underwent a revolutionary transformation. The creation of the Janissary Corps, a formidable infantry force recruited from Christian boys through the Devrmi system, provided the Ottomans with a professional, disciplined army that was unparalleled in Europe. This military innovation would be a key to their dominance for generations. The early Ottoman armies, while effective, were often unreliable. Composed of tribal levies and ghazis, their loyalty was often tied to plunder and land rather than to the central state. Murad I, recognizing the need for a standing, professional army, institutionalized the Devrmi system. Under this system, young Christian boys from the conquered Balkan territories were taken from their families, converted to Islam, and trained to be elite soldiers and administrators. These boys, with no family ties or clan loyalties, were indoctrinated with a fierce loyalty to the Sultan alone. The Janissaries, as they became known, were a fearsome fighting force. Armed with composite bows, swords, and later muskets, they were disciplined, well-trained, and fanatically loyal to the Sultan. Their unique status, neither fully slave nor fully free, gave them a distinct identity and an esprit de corps that made them the shock troops of the Ottoman army. They lived in barracks, trained rigorously, and were paid a regular salary, setting them apart from the traditional feudal armies of Europe. The Janissaries were not the only new military force created under Murad I. He also organized the Sipahi cavalry, a feudal cavalry force granted land in exchange for military service. This system, known as the Taimar, provided the empire with a large and loyal body of horsemen who were responsible for governing and defending their fiefs. The combination of the professional Janissary infantry and the feudal Sipahi cavalry created a military system of remarkable flexibility and power. Murad I's military genius was not limited to these new forces. He was also an accomplished diplomat and administrator who consolidated Ottoman rule in both Anatolia and the Balkans. His conquests, culminating in the decisive victory at the Battle of Kosovo, were a testament to the effectiveness of his new military machine. The Janissary Corps, this elite, professional and loyal army, would become the Sultan's personal instrument of power. and for centuries to come, the fear of their discipline and ferocity would precede the Ottoman armies wherever they went. Murad I's campaigns in the Balkans were a systematic dismantling of established Christian kingdoms. His victories at Maritsa and Kosovo fundamentally altered the political geography of the region, subjugating Bulgarian, Serbian, and other local rulers. The Battle of Kosovo in 1389, though a tactical victory for the Ottomans, became a foundational epic of Serbian national identity and a symbol of the struggle against Ottoman rule. The Ottoman advance into the Balkans was a slow but inexorable process. Following the establishment of a foothold in Gallipoli, Murad I's armies systematically expanded their control, moving from one valley to the next, one fortress to the next. The local rulers, unable to overcome their internal rivalries, were picked off one by one. The first major confrontation was the Battle of Maritsa in 1371, where a coalition of Serbian nobles was decisively defeated. This victory gave the Ottomans a crucial advantage, as it allowed them to establish control over the Vardar Valley and the route to Macedonia. The decisive battle, however, in 1389, a large coalition of Balkan forces, led by the Serbian Prince Lazar, assembled to confront the Ottomans. The battle was a bloody and chaotic affair, fought on the plains of Kosovo. Both Sultan Murad I and Prince Lazar were killed, a testament to the ferocity of the fighting. While the Ottomans suffered heavy casualties, the Balkan coalition was shattered, and their ability to resist Ottoman expansion as a unified force was effectively ended. The aftermath of Kosovo was devastating for the Christian kingdoms of the Balkans. Bulgaria was soon conquered, and Serbia became a tributary state, forced to provide troops and pay tribute to the Ottoman Sultan. The victory gave the Ottomans a clear path to further expansion, but it also created a lasting legacy of resistance. In Serbian folklore, the Battle of Kosovo became a powerful symbol of national identity, a glorious but tragic last stand against a relentless foreign power. The defeat, rather than being forgotten, became a source of cultural memory and a rallying cry for future generations. For the Ottomans, the victory at Kosovo was a testament to the effectiveness of their new military system and their strategic vision. The Balkan Peninsula was now an Ottoman domain, and the empire had become a major European power, poised to challenge the great kingdoms of the continent. Bayezid I, known as Yildirim, the Lightning, for the speed of his campaigns consolidated Ottoman power across a vast territory. He defeated a massive Crusader army at Nicopolis, an event that sent shockwaves through Europe and solidified the Ottoman reputation as a dominant military force. His ambition, however, would soon lead to a catastrophic confrontation with a new and terrifying adversary. Bayezid's reign began with a brutal consolidation of power, as he had his younger brother executed to prevent any challenges to his authority, a practice that would become a tragic and recurring feature of Ottoman succession. His military career was a series of lightning-fast campaigns, earning him his nickname. He expanded Ottoman control in the Balkans, capturing new territories and defeating a series of local rulers. His greatest military triumph came in 1396 at the Battle of Nicopolis, where a massive Crusader army, composed of knights from France, Hungary, and other European kingdoms, attempted to halt the Ottoman advance. The battle was a resounding Ottoman victory. The Crusaders, confident in their superior numbers and martial prowess, were overconfident and undisciplined. Bayezid's well-organized forces, composed of Janissary infantry and Sipahi cavalry, encircled and annihilated the Christian army. The victory was a propaganda coup for the Ottomans, and it shattered the idea of a unified European response to the Ottoman threat. The Ottoman reputation as an unstoppable military force was now a terrifying reality for the rest of Europe. But Bayezid's ambitions were not confined to Europe. He also sought to consolidate Ottoman control in Anatolia, a move that brought him into conflict with other powerful beyliks, and more dangerously, with the great Turco-Mongol conqueror, Timur. Timur, the ruler of a vast empire that stretched from Persia to India, saw the Ottoman expansion in Anatolia as a direct challenge to his authority. The two great conquerors clashed at the Battle of Ankara in 1402, an event that would bring Bayezid's reign to a sudden and catastrophic end. The Ottoman advance was halted abruptly by Timur Tamerlane, the great Turco-Mongol conqueror. The Battle of Ankara in 1402 resulted in a devastating defeat for the Ottomans and the capture of Sultan Bayezid I. This cataclysmic event plunged the empire into a period of chaos and civil war known as the Ottoman Interregnum, a time when the very survival of the state was in doubt. Timur, with his massive and highly disciplined Turco-Mongol army, was a different kind of adversary than the European knights or Balkan lords that Bayezid had previously fought. The Battle of Ankara was a tactical masterpiece by Timur. He outmaneuvered the Ottoman forces, and many of Bayezid's Anatolian allies and subject forces defected to Timur's side during the battle. The result was a complete rout of the Ottoman army and the capture of Sultan Bayezid I himself. The Sultan was paraded in a cage before Timur's army, a humiliating and public display of his defeat. He would later die in captivity. The immediate aftermath of the battle was catastrophic for the Ottoman Empire. Timur, instead of occupying the Ottoman heartland, chose to restore the Anatolian beyliks to their pre-Ottoman rulers, effectively dismantling the empire that Bayezid had so swiftly built. This act of dismemberment plunged the Ottomans into a brutal and bloody civil war between Bayezid's sons for control of the remnants of the empire. This period, known as the Ottoman Interregnum, lasted for over a decade. Brothers fought brothers, and the empire's borders shrunk dramatically as local rulers seized the opportunity to assert their independence. The Janissaries and other elite forces, with no central authority to command them, fought for different claimants to the throne, adding to the chaos. The once feared Ottoman state seemed destined to disappear into the dustbin of history, a temporary anomaly in the centuries-long struggle for power in Anatolia and the Balkans. However, the resilience of the Ottoman political and military system would prove to be a powerful and enduring force. The defeat at Ankara was a severe blow, but it also served as a catalyst for a period of introspection and internal strengthening. The empire's survival through this period of near-total collapse would later be seen as a testament to its fundamental strength and the enduring loyalty of its core institutions. From the ashes of the interregnum, Mehmed I emerged to reunify the empire, a feat that would later earn him the title of the empire's second founder. His reign was one of cautious rebuilding, focused on internal consolidation and the restoration of order after the years of civil strife. The stability he created set the stage for the next great phase of Ottoman expansion. Mehmed I, after a decade of bloody struggle against his brothers, finally emerged as the sole sultan. His victory was not due to a single decisive battle, but to a long and patient campaign of political maneuvering, diplomacy, and military action. He was a master of patience and cunning, and his first priority upon taking the throne was to heal the deep wounds of the civil war. He adopted a policy of reconciliation, offering amnesty to his former rivals' supporters and working to restore order in a fragmented state. His reign was not marked by grand conquests or massive campaigns. Instead, he focused on rebuilding the administrative infrastructure that had collapsed during the interregnum. He re-established the Timar system, which had fallen into disuse, and brought the Janissaries and other military forces back under central control. He also worked to restore the economy, which had been devastated by the years of civil strife. His diplomatic efforts were equally impressive. He signed treaties with neighboring Byzantine and Balkan states, recognizing their sovereignty in exchange for peace and stability. This period of cautious diplomacy allowed the empire to recover its strength and replenish its treasury, a crucial step after the years of war. Mehmed I's reign was a stark contrast to the lightning-fast campaigns of his father, Bayezid I. It was a time of quiet consolidation, of patient rebuilding, and of strategic preparation. He understood that a strong and stable empire could not be built on military victories alone. It required a sound administrative system, a loyal military, and a thriving economy. His legacy as the second founder is a testament to the fact that his actions saved the Ottoman state from extinction. The stability he created, though not as dramatic as the conquests of his predecessors, was the essential foundation upon which the next great phase of Ottoman expansion would be built. Murad II continued the work of his father, turning his attention once more to Europe. He fought a series of protracted and brutal campaigns against the Hungarian general János Hunyadi. The Battle of Varna in 1444, where he decisively defeated a crusader army led by the King of Poland and Hungary, cemented the Ottomans' control over the Balkans and shattered the last hopes of a coordinated European crusade. Murad II was a complex and introspective man who, on 2 occasions, attempted to abdicate the throne in favor of his young son Mehmed. Both times he was forced to return by the pressure of military threats and internal instability. His reign was a constant struggle to maintain the empire's territorial integrity against a resurgent European coalition. The primary antagonist of this period was the brilliant Hungarian general, János Hunyadi, who became a folk hero in Europe for his successful campaigns against the Ottomans. Hunyadi's victories, though limited in scope, galvanized Christian Europe and led to the formation of a new crusader army. In 1444, this crusader army, led by King Władys, all 3 of Poland and Hungary, marched into the Balkans with the goal of driving the Ottomans out of Europe for good. Murad II, who had temporarily abdicated, was forced to return to command his army. The 2 forces clashed at the Battle of Varna. The battle was a bloody and hard-fought affair, but the Ottoman army, with its corps of Janissary infantry and a disciplined command structure, was ultimately victorious. King Władys was killed in the fighting, and the Crusader army was completely routed. The victory at Varna was a decisive moment in Ottoman history. It not only ended the immediate Crusader threat, but also demonstrated that the Ottomans were a permanent and formidable presence in the Balkans. It was the last great coordinated European effort to drive the Ottomans from Europe until the late 17th century. For Murad II, the victory was a moment of profound sadness. He had sought peace and a quiet life, but his duty to his empire had called him back to the battlefield. He would continue to reign for another decade, fighting to maintain the stability of his empire. But the victory at Varna was the defining moment of his military career. Mehmed II, a young and brilliant prince, ascended to the throne for the second time in 1451. Driven by a relentless ambition to claim Constantinople, the city that had eluded his predecessors for over a century, he began meticulous preparations for the greatest siege in Ottoman history. His strategic genius and technological innovation would be tested against the formidable walls of the last great bastion of the Byzantine Empire. Mehmed, who had a deep-seated fascination with Roman and Greek history, saw himself not as merely a conqueror, but as the successor to the Roman emperors. The capture of Constantinople was not just a military goal. It was a matter of destiny and historical legitimacy. The city, known as the City of the World's Desire, was a symbol of imperial power and religious authority that had survived for over 1,000 years. Mehmed began his preparations with a careful and methodical approach that would define his entire reign. He constructed a formidable fortress on the European side of the Bosphorus, Rumeli Hisar, which gave him complete control over the strait and prevented any naval assistance from reaching Constantinople from the Black Sea. He built a new fleet of ships to blockade the city from the sea and prevent any supplies from entering. His most impressive innovation, however, was in siege technology. He commissioned a Hungarian engineer to build a series of colossal cannons, the likes of which had never been seen in the history of warfare. These monstrous guns, some over 26 feet long, were capable of firing stone balls weighing over half a ton. Their sheer size and destructive power were a psychological weapon as much as a military one, meant to strike terror into the hearts of the city's defenders. The Byzantine Emperor, Constantine the XI, and his small garrison of defenders were all too aware of the impending doom. They had a small but dedicated force, and they had the advantage of the massive Theodosian walls, a defensive system that had withstood countless sieges over 1,000 years. But Mehmed's determination was absolute, and his preparations were meticulous. The siege of Constantinople was not just a battle between two armies, it was a clash of civilizations, a final confrontation between the old world and the new. The siege of Constantinople in 1453 was a monumental undertaking that showcased the full might of the Ottoman military machine. Mehmed's engineers constructed colossal cannons, the likes of which had never been seen before. The sight of these monstrous siege engines, capable of breaching the legendary Theodosian walls, struck fear into the hearts of the defenders. The use of a fleet transported over land into the Golden Horn was a masterpiece of military audacity. The Ottoman army, estimated at around 80,000 soldiers, was a multicultural force composed of Janissaries, Sipahis, and Anatolian and Balkan levies. They were supported by a massive logistical train of engineers, sappers, and craftsmen. For over 50 days, the Ottomans battered the city's walls with their giant cannons, a constant, thunderous assault that shook the city to its foundations. The defenders, a small force of a few thousand Greeks and European volunteers, fought with a desperate courage, repairing the walls at night what the cannons had destroyed during the day. The siege was a contest of wills between the attackers and the defenders, a test of who could endure more punishment. Mehmed, a master of strategy, used every tool at his disposal. He ordered his engineers to dig tunnels beneath the walls, a tactic designed to destabilize the foundations and create a breach. The Byzantines, with their own engineers and countersappers, fought a grim and desperate war of tunnels and explosives beneath the city. The most audacious act of the siege, however, was when Mehmed ordered his fleet to be transported overland around the Genoese fortifications at Galata into the Golden Horn. Using a series of greased logs, his ships were pulled by oxen and manpower over the hills, bypassing the great chain that had blocked the harbour. The sight of the Ottoman fleet sailing into the Golden Horn from the landward side must have been a terrifying and demoralizing spectacle for the defenders, who now faced a naval assault from a new direction. The siege, a marvel of military engineering and strategy, demonstrated the Ottoman army's ability to adapt, innovate, and overcome any obstacle in its path. On May 29, 1453, the city fell. Mehmed II rode triumphantly into Hagia Sophia, transforming the ancient basilica into a mosque and reconsecrating the city as the capital of his new empire. The fall of Constantinople, an event that marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, was not merely a military victory, was a profound psychological and political event that established the Ottoman Empire as a major world power. The final assault began at dawn, a massive coordinated attack on the weakest points of the walls. The defenders, exhausted and outnumbered, fought to the last man, but the sheer weight of the Ottoman assault was unstoppable. The death of Emperor Constantine XI in the fighting marked the end of an imperial line that had lasted for over a millennium. For the Ottomans, the conquest of Constantinople was the realization of a generations-long dream, a victory that gave them a true imperial capital. The city, which had been the seat of Roman and Byzantine power for centuries, was now the heart of a new, dynamic, and expansionist empire. Mehmed II, who now styled himself as a new Roman emperor, immediately began the process of rebuilding and repopulating the city. He invited Greeks, Armenians, and Jews to settle there, offering them religious freedom and economic incentives. The Hagia Sophia, the greatest architectural masterpiece of the Byzantine world, was a powerful symbol of the conquest. Its transformation into a mosque was a clear statement of the new order, a public declaration of the triumph of Islam and the arrival of a new imperial power. The fall of Constantinople, an event that shocked and horrified Christian Europe, was seen by the Ottomans as a moment of glorious destiny. The city's new name, Istanbul, which may have derived from the Greek phrase Is T en Polin to the city, was a new name for a new beginning. The conquest was a profound psychological event that shifted the balance of power in the world. The Ottoman Empire was now not just a regional player, but a major world power, poised to challenge Europe and project its influence across 3 continents. Mehmed II, now known as Fatih the Conqueror, undertook a massive project to rebuild and repopulate Constantinople, renaming it Istanbul. His administrative and architectural efforts transformed the city into a vibrant hub of art, trade, and culture, a true imperial capital that blended Roman, Persian, and Turkic traditions. The Hagia Sophia, the Grand Bazaar, and the Topkapi Palace all took shape under his direction. The city that Mehmed inherited was a shadow of its former self, a sparsely populated ruin after the long siege and years of decline. He immediately embarked on an ambitious program of urban renewal and repopulation. He ordered the construction of new mosques, markets, and public buildings, and he established a new palace, the Topkapi Palace, which would serve as the administrative and ceremonial center of the empire for centuries. He also took concrete steps to encourage a diverse population to move to Istanbul, offering them religious freedom and economic incentives. This policy of deliberate pluralism was a hallmark of his reign and a key to the city's rapid revival. The Grand Bazaar, a massive covered market, became a hub of international trade, where goods from Asia, Europe, and Africa were bought and sold. It was a physical manifestation of Istanbul's new status as a global city, a place where cultures and economies met and mingled. Mehmed was also a great patron of the arts and sciences. He invited scholars, artists, and craftsmen from across the Islamic and Christian worlds to his court, a move that created a vibrant intellectual and cultural atmosphere. He was a polyglot who spoke several languages and had a deep interest in both classical and Islamic learning. The Ottoman Empire, under Mehmed, was not just a military power, but a cultural one as well. The architectural style that emerged in Istanbul was a unique blend of Byzantine, Seljuk, and Persian influences, a fusion of traditions that created a distinct and beautiful imperial aesthetic. The legacy of Mehmed the Conqueror is not just in his military conquests, but in his vision for a new imperial capital that would be a center of power, trade, and culture for centuries to come. His transformation of Constantinople into Istanbul was a testament to his ambition, his strategic genius, and his profound understanding of history and empire. Following the conquest of the Byzantine capital, Mehmed II turned his attention to further expansion. He systematically subjugated the remaining Serbian states, conquered the Empire of Trebizond, and established Ottoman naval supremacy in the Aegean Sea. His reign saw the empire's borders expand dramatically, laying the groundwork for the golden age that was to come. Mehmed the Conqueror's military campaigns were a testament to his relentless drive and strategic brilliance. In the Balkans, he systematically dismantled the remaining pockets of independent resistance. He captured the Serbian capital of Belgrade, a key fortress on the Danube, and he brought the territories of Bosnia and Albania under Ottoman control. These campaigns were often brutal, but they were also a necessary step in consolidating Ottoman power in the region. In Anatolia, he completed the work of his predecessors, bringing the last of the independent Turkish beyliks under Ottoman rule. His most significant conquest in this region was the Empire of Trebizond, the last remnant of the Byzantine Empire. The fall of Trebizond in 1461 marked the definitive end of the Byzantine imperial line and consolidated Ottoman control over the entire Anatolian plateau. On the sea, Mehmed understood that a land empire could not survive without a powerful navy. He built a large and modern fleet, challenging the Venetian and Genoese maritime powers in the Aegean and the Black Sea. His capture of the Genoese island of Kaffa, a major Black Sea trading port, gave the Ottomans complete control of the region and access to new markets and resources. Mehmed's reign was a period of constant warfare and expansion, but it was also a time of significant administrative and legal reform. He formalized the system of succession, issuing a law that allowed for the execution of a new sultan's brothers to prevent civil wars. This brutal policy, while tragic, provided a measure of stability that had been lacking in the years of the interregnum. Mehmed the Conqueror's legacy is that of a ruthless and brilliant military commander, a visionary urban planner, and a patron of the arts. His reign laid the geopolitical and institutional foundations for the golden age that would follow, transforming a small Anatolian beylik into a vast and powerful intercontinental empire. The accession of Selim I in 1512 marked the beginning of a new, and for many, more terrifying era of Ottoman expansion. Known as Yavuz the Grim, or the Resolute, Selim seized power from his father through a brutal succession struggle. His short but impactful reign was marked by aggressive expansion to the east and south. He decisively defeated the Safavid Empire at the Battle of Chaldiran and conquered the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, bringing the holy cities of Mecca and Medina under Ottoman control. Selim's reign began in violence, as he had his two brothers and all of their sons executed to prevent any challenges to his authority, a stark and brutal example of the law of fratricide. Once secure on the throne, he turned his attention to the east. His primary adversary was the Safavid Empire of Persia, a powerful Shia Muslim state that posed a direct ideological and military threat to the Sunni Ottoman Empire. The Battle of Chaldiran in 1514 was a clash of titans, with Selim's army, with its superior Janissary infantry and use of cannons, defeating the Safavid cavalry. The victory was a major step in consolidating Ottoman control over eastern Anatolia and establishing the Ottoman-Safavid rivalry as a defining feature of Islamic politics for centuries to come. Following this victory, Selim turned his attention south to the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt. The Mamluks, who had ruled Egypt and Syria for centuries, were a powerful and prestigious military state that controlled the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Selim's conquest of their empire in a lightning-fast campaign was a major strategic and political coup. With the fall of Cairo in 1517, the Ottomans became the undisputed masters of the Sunni Islamic world. The Mamluk Sultanate was dissolved, and its vast wealth and resources, including the rich agricultural lands of Egypt, were now under Ottoman control. But the most significant consequence of this conquest was the transfer of the title of Caliph, the spiritual leader of the Muslim community, to the Ottoman Sultan. This symbolic transfer of authority gave the Ottomans a new level of religious legitimacy and a moral claim to leadership over the entire Islamic world. The accession of Suleiman I in 1520 marked the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's golden age. Known in the West as the Magnificent for his splendor and in the East as the lawgiver Kanuni for his legal reforms, his rule of nearly half a century would see the empire reach its territorial, military, and cultural zenith. His character was a complex blend of ruthless ambition and deep intellectual curiosity. Suleiman inherited a well-oiled military and administrative machine from his father, Selim the Grim, and he immediately set out to expand the empire's borders and consolidate its power. His reign was a period of unparalleled success, a time when the Ottoman Empire was at the peak of its power and influence. In the West, he was seen as a brilliant military commander and a ruthless conqueror. In the East, he was revered as a just and wise ruler, a patron of the arts, and a scholar who presided over a period of immense cultural and intellectual flowering. His personality was a study in contrasts. He was a military leader who personally led his armies on 13 major campaigns, but he was also a poet who wrote under the pseudonym Muhibbi. He was a devout Muslim who built magnificent mosques and religious schools, but he was also a pragmatic ruler who welcomed foreign ambassadors and merchants to his court. He surrounded himself with a court of brilliant scholars, artists, and administrators, and he presided over a period of immense cultural and artistic achievement. The Golden Age of Suleiman was a time of great confidence and stability, a period when the Ottoman Empire was not just a powerful state, but a global superpower. Its armies were feared, its navy was a dominant force, and its wealth and cultural achievements were the envy of the world. The legacy of Suleiman the Magnificent is that of a ruler who not only inherited a great empire, but expanded and refined it, leaving a legacy of military conquest, legal reform, and cultural achievement that would define the Ottoman state for centuries to come. Suleiman's military focus was on Europe. His capture of Belgrade, a key fortress on the Danube, and his decisive victory at the Battle of Mohacs in 1526, where the King of Hungary was killed, opened the doors for a sustained Ottoman presence in Central Europe. The Hungarian monarchy collapsed, and Suleiman was now a major player in the power struggles of the continent. Suleiman's first major European campaign was against the island of Rhodes, the last great stronghold of the Knights Hospitaller, a Christian military order that had been a thorn in the side of the Ottoman Empire for centuries. His successful siege and capture of the island in 1522 was a major strategic victory, securing Ottoman control over the eastern Mediterranean and removing a constant threat to Ottoman shipping. But Suleiman's main focus was on Central Europe, and his primary objective was to conquer Hungary. His first target was Belgrade, a key fortress on the Danube that had resisted Ottoman assaults for decades. The capture of Belgrade in 1521 was a major strategic victory, as it opened the way for an Ottoman invasion of Hungary. The decisive battle of the campaign was the Battle of Mohacs in 1526. The Hungarian army, led by King Louis II, was decisively defeated by the superior Ottoman forces. The battle was a complete disaster for the Hungarians, and King Louis II was killed in the fighting. The victory at Mohacs led to the collapse of the Hungarian monarchy and the partitioning of the country into three parts: a central Ottoman-controlled region, a Habsburg-controlled western region, and an eastern principality that became an Ottoman vassal state. The victory at Mohacs was a watershed moment in European history. The Ottoman Empire was now a major European power, a permanent presence in Central Europe, and a direct threat to the Habsburgs, the most powerful dynasty in Europe. The psychological impact of the victory was immense. The fear of the Ottoman armies and their seemingly unstoppable advance was a constant feature of European politics for the next century. For Suleiman, the victory was the fulfillment of his ambitions in Europe and the beginning of a long and complex struggle for control of the continent. In 1529, Suleiman led a massive army to the gates of Vienna. The siege was a defining moment in Ottoman-Habsburg relations and a high watermark of Ottoman expansion into Central Europe. While the siege ultimately failed due to logistical challenges and harsh weather, it demonstrated the sheer reach of Ottoman power and the existential threat they posed to Christian Europe. The Siege of Vienna was the culmination of Suleiman's European campaigns. After the victory at Mohacs, the Ottomans had established a firm presence in Hungary, and Vienna, the capital of the Habsburg Empire, was the next logical target. Suleiman led a massive army, estimated at over 100,000 men, to the gates of the city. The Ottoman army was a formidable force, composed of janissaries, sipahis, and a vast array of siege cannons. The city's defenders, a small garrison of a few thousand soldiers, were outmanned and outgunned. The siege was a test of wills and a race against time. The Ottomans, with their superior numbers and siege technology, battered the city's walls with their cannons, while the defenders fought a desperate and courageous battle to hold the city. But the Ottoman siege was plagued by logistical challenges from the very beginning. The long march from Istanbul had stretched the supply lines to their breaking point. The heavy cannons, which were crucial for breaching the city's walls, had to be abandoned along the way due to the long and difficult march through the Balkans. The siege also took place in the late autumn, and the cold and rainy weather made conditions for the Ottoman army miserable. The defenders, on the other hand, were well supplied and determined to hold the city. After several weeks of fighting, Suleiman, facing a determined defense, a determined garrison, and the onset of winter, was forced to lift the siege and retreat. The failure to capture Vienna was a major disappointment for Suleiman, but it was not a decisive defeat. The Ottoman Empire remained a major European power, and its presence in Hungary was a constant threat to the Habsburgs for the next century. For Europe, the victory at Vienna was a moment of immense relief and a powerful symbol of Christian resistance. The siege, though a tactical failure for the Ottomans, demonstrated the sheer power and reach of their empire, and it would remain a constant source of fear and anxiety for the rest of Europe. Under Suleiman, the Ottoman navy, commanded by legendary admirals like Hayreddin Barbarossa, became the dominant force in the Mediterranean. They captured Tunis and Tripoli, challenged Spanish and Portuguese naval power, and protected Ottoman trade routes. The Mediterranean, for a time, became an Ottoman lake, a testament to the empire's command of the sea. Suleiman understood that an empire that stretched across 3 continents needed a powerful navy to protect its sea lanes and project its influence. He invested heavily in shipbuilding and commissioned a series of great admirals to command his fleet. The most famous of these was Hayreddin Barbarossa, a brilliant and ruthless corsair who had established a pirate kingdom in Algiers. Barbarossa, with his formidable fleet of galleys and his intimate knowledge of Mediterranean sea lanes, became the terror of the Mediterranean. He defeated the combined fleets of Spain and the Holy Roman Empire at the Battle of Preveza in 1538, a victory that established Ottoman naval supremacy in the Mediterranean for decades to come. The Ottoman navy's control of the Mediterranean had a profound impact on European politics and trade. It allowed the Ottomans to protect their sea lanes, control the flow of goods from the east to the west, and launch attacks on the coastlines of Spain and Italy. The Ottomans captured a series of key port cities, including Tunis and Tripoli, which gave them a firm presence in North Africa and a strategic advantage in their rivalry with Spain. The Ottoman navy was not just a military force, it was also a crucial part of the empire's economic infrastructure. It protected the trade routes that brought goods from Asia and Africa to Istanbul, and it allowed the empire to control the flow of goods and services throughout its vast territories. The Ottoman navy was a symbol of the empire's power and a key to its prosperity. The Mediterranean, which had been a sea of conflict and rivalry for centuries, was now a sea dominated by a single, powerful empire. The Golden Age of Suleiman was a time when the Ottoman Empire was not just a land-based power, but a global superpower that controlled both the land and the sea. The naval victories of Barbarossa and the expansion of Ottoman sea power were a crucial part of this Golden Age. Suleiman's domestic reforms were as significant as his military campaigns. He presided over a comprehensive codification of Ottoman law, harmonizing the existing customary law with Islamic principles. This new legal framework, known as the Kanun name, created a stable and predictable administrative system that governed everything from land tenure to criminal justice. Suleiman's reputation as a lawgiver was well deserved. He understood that a vast empire could not be governed by military force alone. It required a sound legal and administrative system that was both fair and predictable. He commissioned a team of legal scholars to review and codify the existing Ottoman laws, which had been a patchwork of different legal traditions. The resulting legal framework, the Kanun name, was a monumental achievement. It covered a wide range of legal issues, including land tenure, taxation, and criminal law. It also established a clear hierarchy of courts and judges, ensuring that justice was administered in a fair and consistent manner. The Kanun name was not just a legal code, it was a philosophical statement about the nature of Ottoman rule. It established the principle that the Sultan was not above the law, but was bound by its principles. It also provided a clear legal framework for the non-Muslim subjects of the empire, granting them a degree of religious freedom and legal autonomy that was unparalleled in Christian Europe. The legal reforms of Suleiman were a crucial part of his legacy. They created a stable and predictable administrative system that governed the empire for centuries. They also helped to create a sense of justice and fairness that was a key to the empire's success. The Ottoman Empire, under Suleiman, was not just a military power, but a state based on the rule of law. The Kanunnameh was a testament to his vision and his commitment to building a just and stable society. The legal reforms of Suleiman were a crucial part of the empire's golden age. The harem, far from being just a place of confinement, became a center of political power during Suleiman's reign. The influence of his favorite concubine, later his legal wife, Hurrem Sultan Roxolana, and later their daughter Mihrimah Sultan, demonstrated a new era of female political involvement. This period is often referred to as the Sultanate of Women. For centuries, the Ottoman court had been a male-dominated world, where the Sultan's mother, the Valide Sultan, was the most influential woman. But under Suleiman, a new dynamic emerged. His favorite concubine, a girl of Slavic origin named Hurrem, was a woman of exceptional intelligence and political acumen. She became Suleiman's confidant and advisor, and, in a break with Ottoman tradition, he married her, making her his legal wife, and giving her a new level of power and influence. Hurrem Sultan's influence was a turning point in Ottoman history. She used her position to promote her own sons and to influence imperial policy. She was a great patron of the arts and architecture, and she established a series of charitable foundations that provided aid to the poor and built mosques, hospitals, and schools. Her political influence was so great that her period of influence is often referred to as the Sultanate of Women, a time when the women of the imperial family, particularly the Valide Sultan, began to play a more active and direct role in imperial politics. The influence of women in the harem was not a sign of weakness, but a sign of the empire's sophistication and adaptability. The women of the harem were not just objects of the sultan's affection. They were highly educated and politically astute women who understood the inner workings of the court and the complexities of imperial politics. They used their influence to promote their own family members and to influence imperial policy, a testament to the power of the women of the imperial family. The legacy of the Sultanate of Women is that of a period of immense political and social change, a time when the women of the imperial family, particularly the Valide Sultan, played a more active and direct role in imperial politics. This period of female influence would have a profound impact on Ottoman history for centuries to come. Suleiman's era was a golden age of arts and architecture. His chief architect, Mimar Sinan, designed some of the most iconic structures in Ottoman history, including the Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul. These buildings, with their breathtaking domes and intricate tilework, were not merely places of worship, but monuments to the empire's wealth, piety, and cultural sophistication. Suleiman was a great patron of the arts, and his court was a hub of creativity and innovation. He invited the finest artists, craftsmen, and poets from across his empire to his court, and he commissioned a series of great architectural projects that would leave a lasting legacy. The most famous of these artists was Mimar Sinan, a Janissary-trained engineer and architect who became the chief architect of the empire. Sinan was a genius of his time, a master of engineering and design who built over 300 major structures, including mosques, bridges, aqueducts, and caravanserais. His masterpiece was the Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul, a massive and breathtaking complex that was a testament to the empire's wealth and power. The mosque, with its soaring dome, elegant minarets, and intricate tilework, was a masterpiece of Ottoman architecture and a symbol of the empire's cultural sophistication. Sinan's other masterpieces included the Selimiye Mosque in Edirne, which he considered his greatest work, and the Sokollu Mehmed Pasha Mosque in Istanbul, a smaller but equally beautiful mosque that was a testament to his versatility and skill. The golden age of Suleiman was not just a time of great architecture. It was also a time of great poetry, with poets like Baki and Fuzuli writing some of the finest poetry in the history of the Ottoman Empire. It was a time of great art, with calligraphers, miniaturists, and tile makers creating works of breathtaking beauty and sophistication. The Ottoman Empire under Suleiman was not just a military power, but a cultural one as well. The artistic and architectural achievements of his reign were a testament to the empire's wealth, its piety, and its cultural sophistication. The legacy of Suleiman's golden age is that of a period of unparalleled creativity and innovation, a time when the Ottoman Empire was at the peak of its power and influence. The system of grand viziers, the sultan's chief ministers, reached its peak of power and effectiveness under Suleiman. Men like Pargal, Ibrahim Pasha, and Rustam Pasha were not merely administrators, but brilliant military commanders and diplomats who held vast authority. The quality of these officials reflected the high standards of the Ottoman meritocratic system. The Grand Vizier was the Sultan's chief minister and was responsible for all aspects of imperial administration and military command. They presided over the imperial council, the Divan, and were the public face of the Sultan's authority. Under Suleiman, the Grand Vizierate reached its peak of power and prestige. Men like Pargal, Ibrahim Pasha, a former slave who rose to become one of the most powerful men in the empire, were not just administrators but military commanders and diplomats who held vast authority. Ibrahim Pasha, a childhood friend of Suleiman, was a brilliant military commander who led Ottoman armies on a series of successful campaigns. He was also a master diplomat who negotiated treaties with European powers and managed the complex relationships with the empire's vassal states. His career, a testament to the meritocratic nature of the Ottoman system, ended tragically when he was executed by Suleiman in 1536, a shocking act that demonstrated the absolute power of the Sultan. Ibrahim's successor, Rustam Pasha, was a shrewd and cunning administrator who was responsible for a period of immense economic prosperity. He was a master of finance and a skilled diplomat who managed the empire's vast wealth and resources. The Grand Viziers of Suleiman's era were not just political figures. They were men of exceptional talent and skill, who were responsible for the smooth functioning of a vast and complex empire. Their quality was a reflection of the high standards of the Ottoman system, which was based on merit rather than birth. The Grand Vizierate was a key to the empire's success, a system that provided the Sultan with a team of brilliant and capable administrators who were responsible for all aspects of imperial administration. The legacy of the Grand Viziers of Suleiman's era is that of a period of immense political and administrative competence, a time when the Ottoman Empire was at the peak of its power and influence. Suleiman the Magnificent's long reign created an empire that was wealthy, stable, and culturally vibrant. His death in 1566 marked not a sudden decline, but the beginning of a long and complex period of gradual change. The political, military, and administrative structures he had perfected would endure, but the internal and external pressures on the empire were steadily increasing. Suleiman's death was a turning point in Ottoman history. His reign had been a period of unparalleled success, a time when the empire was at the peak of its power and influence. But the seeds of its future decline were already being sown. The vast size of the empire, which now stretched from Hungary to Persia and from the Crimea to North Africa, made it increasingly difficult to govern. The administrative system, which had been so effective under Suleiman, began to show signs of strain. The Janissaries, the elite infantry force that had been a key to the empire's success, began to become a source of internal instability. They were now a powerful and politicized force that used their influence to stage coups and depose sultans. The Ottoman Empire was also facing new external threats. The European powers, which had been humbled by Suleiman, were now recovering their strength and beginning to challenge Ottoman naval and military supremacy. The Spanish and Portuguese navies, with their new galleons and cannons, were a new and formidable threat in the Mediterranean. In Central Europe, the Habsburgs were rebuilding their armies and beginning to push back against Ottoman expansion. The legacy of Suleiman's Golden Age is a complex one. His reign was a period of immense success, but it also created the conditions for a long and gradual decline. The political, military, and administrative structures he had perfected would endure, but they were no longer a match for the new threats and challenges that the empire would face in the centuries to come. The death of Suleiman was the end of a golden age, but it was also the beginning of a long and complex period of gradual change, a time when the Ottoman Empire would struggle to maintain its power and influence in a rapidly changing world. The years following Suleiman's death saw a shift in the nature of Ottoman rule. Succeeding sultans were less hands-on rulers, often raised in the cafes, the cage, a system of royal confinement that deprived them of political experience. This created a power vacuum that was increasingly filled by the military, the Janissaries, and the Grand Viziers. The Ottoman system of succession, which had been based on the law of fratricide, was a brutal but effective way of ensuring a strong and capable ruler. But in the late 16th century, the system was changed. The new system of seniority, which saw the eldest male member of the royal family ascend to the throne, often resulted in sultans who were old and inexperienced, having spent their lives confined in the harem. The cafes, a system of royal confinement, was designed to prevent succession struggles, but it had a disastrous effect on the quality of the sultans. The princes, who were raised in the harem and had no contact with the outside world, were often unprepared for the responsibilities of imperial rule. This created a power vacuum that was increasingly filled by the Grand Viziers, who became the de facto rulers of the empire. The Janissaries, who had become a powerful and politicized force, also used their influence to stage coups and depose sultans. The Janissary Corps, which had once been a disciplined and professional army, was now a hereditary and corrupt force that was more interested in its own power and privileges than in the welfare of the empire. The military, which had been a key to the empire's success, was now a major source of internal instability. The slowing of the Ottoman political engine was a gradual process. It was not a sudden collapse, but a slow and steady decline that was the result of a series of internal and external pressures. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a dynamic and expansionist state under Suleiman, was now a stagnant and corrupt state that was struggling to maintain its power and influence. The political and administrative structures that had been so effective under Suleiman were now a source of weakness. The slowing of the Ottoman engine was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to adapt to a changing world. While Europe was undergoing the scientific revolution and the Renaissance, the Ottoman Empire, resting on its past glories, failed to keep pace with technological and military developments. This strategic complacency led to a series of defeats, most notably at the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, where the Holy League shattered the myth of Ottoman naval invincibility. The Ottoman Empire's golden age under Suleiman had created a sense of complacency and superiority. The Ottomans believed that their military and political system was superior to that of the Europeans, and they saw no need to adapt to new technologies and new ideas. But in Europe, a new world was being born. The scientific revolution was transforming European society, and new technologies, particularly in shipbuilding and artillery, were giving European armies and navies a new level of power. The Ottoman Empire, with its focus on traditional military technologies and its rigid and conservative society, failed to keep pace. The Battle of Lepanto in 1571 was a wake-up call. A combined fleet of Christian powers, known as the Holy League, confronted the Ottoman navy off the coast of Greece. The battle was a resounding defeat for the Ottomans, who lost a significant portion of their fleet. The victory was a major psychological blow for the Ottomans, who had believed that their navy was invincible. It also shattered the myth of Ottoman naval supremacy in the Mediterranean and signaled the beginning of a long and gradual decline of Ottoman sea power. The Battle of Lepanto was not a decisive defeat that ended Ottoman power. The Ottomans quickly rebuilt their fleet, and they continued to be a major naval power for the next century. But the victory at Lepanto was a turning point. It showed that the Ottomans were no longer invincible, and that they were now facing a new and formidable challenge from the European powers. The price of Ottoman stagnation was a series of defeats and a slow and steady decline. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a dynamic and expansionist state under Suleiman, was now a stagnant and conservative state that was struggling to maintain its power and influence. The Battle of Lepanto was a tragic and complex story. A story of a great empire that was struggling to maintain its power and influence in a rapidly changing world. The once elite Janissary Corps, no longer recruited through the Deverma system, became a hereditary and highly politicized force. They used their immense power to influence imperial policy, stage coups, and even depose sultans. The Janissaries, once the empire's greatest strength, were now a major source of its internal instability. The Janissary Corps, created by Murad I, had been a key to the empire's success. It was a professional, disciplined army that was fanatically loyal to the Sultan. But in the 17th and 18th centuries, the Janissaries began to change. The Deverma system, which had provided the corps with a constant supply of fresh talent, was abolished, and the Janissary Corps became a hereditary force, where sons of Janissaries were automatically enrolled in the corps. This change had a disastrous effect on the quality and discipline of the Janissaries. They were no longer the elite professional soldiers of Suleiman's era. They were now a corrupt and politicized force that was more interested in its own power and privileges than in the welfare of the empire. The Janissaries became a major source of internal instability. They used their immense power to influence imperial policy, stage coups, and even depose sultans. They were a constant threat to the central authority of the state, and they often resisted any attempts at military or administrative reform. The Janissaries, once the empire's greatest strength, were now a major source of its weakness. They were a symbol of the empire's stagnation and its inability to adapt to a changing world. The story of the Janissaries is a tragic and complex one, a story of a great institution that, in the end, became a source of the empire's decline. The Janissaries, once the shock troops of the Ottoman army, were now a corrupt and politicized force that was more interested in its own power and privileges than in the welfare of the empire. Their story is a reminder of the dangers of institutional decay and the importance of adaptability and reform. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the central authority of the state began to weaken, allowing local notables known as the Ayan to consolidate power in the provinces. These feudal-like warlords collected taxes and maintained private armies, often acting independently of the Sultan. This decentralization of power was a clear sign of the empire's fraying fabric. The Ottoman Empire, under Suleiman, had been a highly centralized state, where the Sultan's authority was absolute. But in the centuries that followed, the central authority of the state began to weaken. The sultans, who were often inexperienced and isolated in the harem, were unable to maintain control over the vast and diverse provinces of the empire. This created a power vacuum that was increasingly filled by local notables known as the Ayan. These feudal-like warlords were often wealthy landowners or military commanders who used their immense power to collect taxes, maintain private armies, and act independently of the Sultan. They were a major source of internal instability, and they often resisted any attempts at central control. The rise of the Ayan was a clear sign of the empire's fraying fabric. It was a period of decentralization, a time when the central authority of the state was replaced by a patchwork of local strongmen. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a highly centralized state, was now a fragmented and decentralized state that was struggling to maintain its power and influence. The rise of the Ayan was a tragic and complex story. A story of a great empire that was struggling to adapt to a changing world. The Ayan, who were once a source of strength for the empire, were now a major source of its weakness. They were a symbol of the empire's stagnation and its inability to adapt to a changing world. Their story is a reminder of the dangers of decentralization and the importance of a strong and effective central government. The early 18th century saw a brief and fascinating era of peace and cultural flowering known as the Tulip Period. Under Sultan Ahmed III, the court became a center of European-style art, poetry, and architecture. This period, however, was an insular and aristocratic affair, disconnected from the broader social and military realities of the empire's slow decline. The Tulip Period, which spanned from 1718 to 1730, was a unique and fascinating era in Ottoman history. It was a time of peace and prosperity, a period when the Ottoman Empire was no longer engaged in major wars with its European rivals. This period of peace allowed for a flowering of arts and culture, a time when the Ottoman court, under the patronage of Sultan Ahmed III and his Grand Vizier Nevherheli Damat Brahim Pasha, became a center of European-style art and architecture. The court of Ahmed III was a place of immense splendor and opulence. It was a time of great poetry, with poets like Nadim writing some of the finest poetry in the history of the Ottoman Empire. It was a time of great art, with miniaturists, calligraphers, and tile makers creating works of breathtaking beauty and sophistication. The most famous symbol of this era was the tulip, a flower that had been introduced to Europe from the Ottoman Empire. The court of Ahmed III was obsessed with the tulip, and a series of festivals and celebrations were held in its honor. But the Tulip Period was an insular and aristocratic affair, disconnected from the broader social and military realities of the empire's slow decline. While the court was obsessed with tulips and European-style art, the empire was struggling to keep pace with the military and technological developments of the European powers. The Janissaries, who were now a corrupt and politicized force, were a major source of internal instability. The central authority of the state was weakening, and local notables were consolidating power in the provinces. The Tulip Period came to a sudden and violent end in 1730, when a Janissary-led rebellion deposed Sultan Ahmed III and ended this brief era of peace and cultural flowering. The Tulip Period was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to adapt to a changing world. It was a reminder of the dangers of a disconnected elite and the importance of a strong and effective central government. The emergence of a powerful and expansionist Russian Empire under Peter the Great and Catherine the Great posed a new and existential threat to the Ottomans. Russia's desire for warm water ports and its claim to protect the Orthodox Christians within the empire led to a series of devastating wars that saw the Ottomans lose significant territories in the Crimea and the Caucasus. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire had been a major player in European politics, a powerful and feared military state that had successfully fought a series of wars against the European powers. But in the 18th century, a new and formidable threat emerged from the north. The Russian Empire, under the brilliant and ruthless leadership of Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, was a new kind of adversary. Russia was a dynamic and expansionist state that was rapidly modernizing its military and its administrative system. Its primary ambition was to gain access to warm water ports in the Black Sea, a goal that brought it into direct conflict with the Ottoman Empire. The Russian claim to protect the Orthodox Christians within the Ottoman Empire was a powerful ideological weapon that allowed them to interfere in Ottoman internal affairs and to justify their military campaigns. The Russo-Turkish Wars of the 18th century were a series of devastating conflicts that saw the Ottomans lose significant territories. The Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca in 1774, which ended the Russo-Turkish War of 1768-1774, was a major blow to the Ottoman Empire. It gave Russia control of the Crimea, a key strategic territory that had been an Ottoman vassal state for centuries. It also granted Russia the right to protect the Orthodox Christians within the Ottoman Empire, a provision that gave Russia a powerful legal pretext for future interference in Ottoman internal affairs. The emergence of the Russian threat was a turning point in Ottoman history. The empire, which had been a major European power, was now a declining state that was struggling to defend its borders against a new and powerful adversary. The loss of the Crimea and other territories was a major psychological and political blow for the Ottomans. It was a clear sign that the balance of power in Europe had shifted and that the Ottoman Empire was no longer a dominant force. The Russian threat was a tragic and complex story. A story of a great empire that was struggling to adapt to a changing world. In the late 18th century, some enlightened sultans recognized the need for fundamental change. Selim III's military and administrative reforms, inspired by European models, were an attempt to modernize the state. However, his efforts were met with fierce resistance from the traditional power brokers, particularly the Janissaries, who saw these changes as a threat to their privileges. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a dynamic and expansionist state under Suleiman, was now a stagnant and conservative state that was struggling to adapt to a changing world. The military, which had been a key to the empire's success, was now a corrupt and politicized force that was more interested in its own power and privileges than in the welfare of the empire. The central authority of the state was weakening, and local notables were consolidating power in the provinces. In the late 18th century, a new generation of sultans, inspired by the military and administrative successes of the European powers, recognized the need for fundamental change. Selim III, an enlightened and reform-minded sultan, was a key figure in this period of attempted modernization. He introduced a series of military and administrative reforms known as the Nizam, Seeded New Order, that were designed to modernize the Ottoman army and its administrative system. He established a new army, trained and equipped with European weapons and tactics, that was designed to replace the corrupt and undisciplined Janissaries. He also introduced a series of administrative reforms that were designed to centralize power and streamline the bureaucracy. But Selim III's reforms were met with fierce resistance from the traditional power brokers of the empire. The Janissaries, who saw the New Order army as a direct threat to their power and privileges, staged a series of rebellions that ultimately led to Selim's deposition and execution in 1807. The failure of Selim III's reforms was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to adapt to a changing world. It was a reminder of the power of institutional inertia and the difficulty of reforming a state that was plagued by corruption and internal instability. The story of Selim III's reforms is a reminder that the decline of the Ottoman Empire was not an inevitable process, but a result of a series of choices and failures. The 19th century was a period of sustained territorial loss and profound internal crises. The Greek War of Independence, followed by similar national liberation movements in Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria, tore at the empire's European provinces. The sick man of Europe was a term coined to describe the state's seemingly terminal decline. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire for centuries, was now facing a new and existential threat from within: nationalism. The French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars had introduced the idea of the nation-state to Europe, and this new idea was spreading to the Balkans, where Christian subjects of the empire were beginning to demand independence. The Greek War of Independence, which began in 1821, was a major blow to the Ottoman Empire. The Greeks, with the help of European powers, fought a brutal and bloody war that ended with the establishment of an independent Greek state in 1832. The loss of Greece was a major psychological and political blow for the Ottomans, who had been a dominant force in the Balkans for centuries. The Greek War of Independence was followed by similar national liberation movements in Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria, all of which led to the loss of Ottoman territories and the establishment of new, independent states. The sick man of Europe, a term coined by Tsar Nicholas I of Russia, was a perfect metaphor for the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century. The empire was a vast and sprawling state that was plagued by internal crises and external threats. Its economy was in tatters, its military was outdated, and its administrative system was corrupt and inefficient. The empire was a vast, sprawling patient, and the European powers, like vultures, were circling, waiting for it to die. The era of disintegration was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to survive in a world that was rapidly changing. It was a reminder of the dangers of nationalism and the difficulty of governing a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire in a world of nation-states. The Tanzimat era, a period of comprehensive reform from 1839 to 1876, was a desperate attempt to modernize the empire from the top down. The government issued decrees that granted equal rights to all citizens regardless of religion, established new secular schools, and created a more centralized bureaucracy. The reforms were ambitious, but ultimately struggled to overcome deep-seated social and ethnic tensions. The Tanzimat era was a period of immense change, a time when the Ottoman government, under the leadership of a series of reform-minded Grand Viziers, attempted to modernize the empire from the top down. The reforms were inspired by the military and administrative successes of the European powers, and they were designed to save the empire from collapse. The most important of these reforms was the Hat Erif of Gülhane in 1839, a decree that promised to end arbitrary government and to guarantee the life, property, and honor of all subjects, regardless of their religion. This was followed by the Hat Humayun in 1856, a decree that granted equal rights to all citizens, including non-Muslims. The reforms also included the establishment of new secular schools, a new legal system based on European models, and a new, more centralized bureaucracy. The Tanzimat reforms were a sincere and ambitious attempt to modernize the empire, but they ultimately struggled to overcome deep-seated social and ethnic tensions. The reforms were often resisted by traditional power brokers, particularly the religious establishment, who saw them as a threat to their power and privileges. The reforms were also a major source of resentment among some Muslim subjects, who felt that their traditional dominance was being challenged. The Tanzimat era was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to adapt to a changing world. It was a reminder of the dangers of a disconnected elite and the importance of a strong and effective central government. The very reforms designed to save the empire paradoxically accelerated its demise. By granting greater rights and recognition to non-Muslim subjects, the Tanzimat encouraged the growth of a new form of identity politics: nationalism. Greek, Armenian, and Slavic intellectuals began to articulate a vision of independent nation-states, a direct challenge to the multi-ethnic, multi-religious foundation of the Ottoman Empire. The Tanzimat reforms, while well-intentioned, had a disastrous effect on the Ottoman Empire. By granting greater rights and recognition to non-Muslim subjects, the reforms paradoxically encouraged the growth of nationalism, a new and powerful ideological force that was sweeping through Europe. Greek, Armenian, and Slavic intellectuals who had been educated in the new secular schools and had been exposed to the ideas of the French Revolution began to articulate a vision of independent nation-states. They argued that their peoples were distinct nations with a right to self-determination, a direct challenge to the multi-ethnic, multi-religious foundation of the Ottoman Empire. The growth of nationalism was a major source of internal instability, and it led to a series of national liberation movements that tore at the empire's European provinces. The Greek War of Independence, followed by similar movements in Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria, was a direct consequence of the growth of nationalism. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire for centuries, was now a fragmented and decentralized state that was struggling to maintain its power and influence. The rise of nationalism was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to adapt to a changing world. It was a reminder of the dangers of a disconnected elite and the importance of a strong and effective central government. Abdul Hamid II, an iron-willed sultan, suspended the constitution and dissolved the parliament, establishing a period of authoritarian rule. He centralized power once more, using a vast secret police network to suppress dissent. While a despot, he was also a modernizer, building railroads, establishing a modern postal system, and founding new schools and hospitals, a last-ditch effort to strengthen the empire through centralized control. The reign of Abdul Hamid II, which lasted from 1876 to 1909, was a period of immense change, a time when the Ottoman Empire was struggling to survive in a world that was rapidly changing. Abdul Hamid, an iron-willed and autocratic sultan, suspended the constitution and dissolved the parliament, establishing a period of authoritarian rule. He centralized power once more, using a vast secret police network to suppress dissent. But Abdul Hamid was also a modernizer, a sultan who recognized the need for fundamental change. He built a series of railroads, including the famous Hejaz Railway, which connected Damascus to Medina and was a symbol of the empire's modernization. He also established a modern postal system, a new legal system, and a series of new schools and hospitals. His reign was a last-ditch effort to strengthen the empire through centralized control and modernization. But Abdul Hamid's authoritarian rule was met with fierce resistance from the new generation of Ottoman intellectuals and military officers who had been educated in the new secular schools and had been exposed to the ideas of the French Revolution. They were a clandestine revolutionary movement known as the Young Turks, and they were determined to restore the constitution and parliament. The reign of Abdul Hamid II was a tragic and complex story. A story of a great empire that was struggling to adapt to a changing world. It was a reminder of the dangers of authoritarian rule and the importance of a strong and effective central government. A clandestine revolutionary movement, the Young Turks, consisting of military officers and intellectuals, grew disillusioned with Abdulhamid's authoritarianism. In 1908, they staged a successful revolution that forced the Sultan to restore the constitution and parliament. This event, hailed as a triumph of liberty, sparked a wave of internal chaos and further territorial losses. The Young Turks, a clandestine revolutionary movement that had been growing in influence for decades, were a new generation of Ottoman intellectuals and military officers who had been educated in the new secular schools and had been exposed to the ideas of the French Revolution. They were disillusioned with Abdulhamid II's authoritarian rule and were determined to restore the constitution and parliament. In 1908, they staged a successful revolution that forced the Sultan to restore the constitution and parliament. The Young Turk Revolution was a moment of immense hope and excitement. It was hailed as a triumph of liberty and a sign that the Ottoman Empire was finally ready to embrace the modern world. But the revolution, which had been a triumph of liberty, sparked a wave of internal chaos and further territorial losses. The new government, which was dominated by the Young Turks, was weak and inexperienced. It was unable to maintain control over the vast and diverse provinces of the empire, and it was plagued by internal divisions and rivalries. The Young Turk Revolution was followed by a series of national liberation movements in the Balkans, which led to the loss of Ottoman territories and the establishment of new, independent states. The Young Turk Revolution was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to adapt to a changing world. It was a reminder of the dangers of a weak and inexperienced government and the importance of a strong and effective central government. A coalition of Balkan states, seizing on the political instability of the Young Turk Revolution, declared war on the Ottoman Empire in 1912. In a series of catastrophic military defeats, the Ottomans lost nearly all their remaining European territories, including their historic capital in the Balkans, Edirne. This marked a profound and final blow to the empire's European identity. The Balkan Wars of 1912–1913 were a major blow to the Ottoman Empire, a period of immense territorial loss and profound internal crises. A coalition of Balkan states, including Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, and Montenegro, seized on the political instability of the Young Turk Revolution and declared war on the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman army, which was outdated and poorly led, was no match for the combined forces of the Balkan states. In a series of catastrophic military defeats, the Ottomans lost nearly all their remaining European territories, including their historic capital in the Balkans, Edirne. The loss of Edirne was a major psychological and political blow for the Ottomans, who had been a dominant force in the Balkans for centuries. The Balkan Wars were a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to survive in a world that was rapidly changing. It was a reminder of the dangers of a weak and outdated military and the importance of a strong and effective central government. The Balkan Wars were a major turning point in Ottoman history, a period of immense territorial loss and profound internal crises. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire for centuries, was now a fragmented and decentralized state that was struggling to maintain its power and influence. By 1914, the Ottoman Empire was a shadow of its former self, financially dependent on European powers and diplomatically isolated. The powerful triumvirate of Enver, Talat, and Cemal Pasha, a hardline nationalist faction within the Young Turks, saw an alliance with Germany as the only path to national revival. This fateful decision would drag the empire into the heart of a global conflict. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a major European power for centuries, was now a shadow of its former self. Its economy was in tatters, its military was outdated, and its administrative system was corrupt and inefficient. The empire was financially dependent on European powers, and it was diplomatically isolated. The powerful triumvirate of Enver, Talat, and Cemal Pasha, a hardline nationalist faction within the Young Turks, saw an alliance with Germany as the only path to national revival. They believed that an alliance with Germany would allow the Ottoman Empire to regain its lost territories and to restore its power and influence. This fateful decision would drag the empire into the heart of a global conflict. The empire's entry into World War I was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to save the empire from collapse. The war would be fought on multiple fronts: the Caucasus, Mesopotamia, Sinai, and Gallipoli, and it would push the already weakened state to its absolute limits. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a major European power for centuries, was now a shadow of its former self. It was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to survive in a world that was rapidly changing. The empire's entry into the war, triggered by the German-commanded bombardment of Russian ports in the Black Sea, was a desperate gamble. The war would be fought on multiple fronts: the Caucasus, Mesopotamia, Sinai, and Gallipoli, and would push the already weakened state to its absolute limits. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a major European power for centuries, was now a shadow of its former self. Its economy was in tatters, its military was outdated, and its administrative system was corrupt and inefficient. The powerful triumvirate of Enver, Talat, and Cemal Pasha, a hardline nationalist faction within the Young Turks, saw an alliance with Germany as the only path to national revival. They believed that an alliance with Germany would allow the Ottoman Empire to regain its lost territories and to restore its power and influence. This fateful decision would drag the empire into the heart of a global conflict. The empire's entry into World War I was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to save the empire from collapse. The war would be fought on multiple fronts: the Caucasus, Mesopotamia, Sinai, and Gallipoli, and it would push the already weakened state to its absolute limits. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a major European power for centuries, was now a shadow of its former self. It was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to survive in a world that was rapidly changing. The Gallipoli campaign of 1915,000 and 1916 was a major Allied attempt to capture Constantinople and knock the Ottomans out of the war. The campaign was a military and logistical nightmare for the Allies, and the Ottoman forces, commanded by a young and brilliant Mustafa Kemal, fought with a ferocity that stunned the world. The Allied withdrawal was a rare but significant Ottoman victory. The Gallipoli campaign, which lasted for over a year, was a major Allied attempt to capture Constantinople and knock the Ottomans out of the war. The campaign was a military and logistical nightmare for the Allies, who suffered heavy casualties and were unable to achieve their objectives. The Ottoman forces, commanded by a young and brilliant Mustafa Kemal, fought with a ferocity that stunned the world. The Allied withdrawal was a rare but significant Ottoman victory, a testament to the courage and determination of the Ottoman army. The Gallipoli campaign was a major turning point in the war, a moment when the Ottoman Empire, which had been a shadow of its former self, showed that it was still a formidable military power. It was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to survive in a world that was rapidly changing. While fighting the British and Russians, the Ottoman government faced a rebellion in its own backyard. The Arab Revolt, orchestrated by Sharif Hussein of Mecca and supported by the British, tore through the empire's Middle Eastern territories. The campaign, which saw figures like T.E. Lawrence emerge as legends, was a powerful expression of burgeoning Arab nationalism and a major factor in the empire's defeat. The Ottoman government, which was fighting a war on multiple fronts, faced a rebellion in its own backyard. The Arab Revolt, which began in 1916, was a rebellion against Ottoman rule in the Middle East. The revolt, which was orchestrated by Sharif Hussein of Mecca and supported by the British, tore through the empire's Middle Eastern territories. The campaign, which saw figures like T.E. Lawrence emerge as legends, was a powerful expression of burgeoning Arab nationalism and a major factor in the empire's defeat. The Arab Revolt was a major blow to the Ottoman Empire, a period of immense territorial loss and profound internal crises. It was a tragic and complex story, the story of a great empire that was struggling to survive in a world that was rapidly changing. By 1918, the Ottoman Empire was exhausted. Its armies were broken, its economy was in tatters, and its territories were in the hands of Allied forces. The signing of the Armistice of Mudros brought an end to the fighting, but it was followed by the imposition of a harsh treaty and the military occupation of Istanbul itself, a final and ultimate humiliation. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a major European power for centuries, was now a shadow of its former self. Its armies were broken, its economy was in tatters, and its territories were in the hands of Allied forces. The signing of the Armistice of Mudros brought an end to the fighting, but it was followed by the imposition of a harsh treaty and the military occupation of Istanbul itself, a final and ultimate humiliation. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire for centuries, was now a fragmented and decentralized state that was struggling to maintain its power and influence. It was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to survive in a world that was rapidly changing. The official end of the Ottoman Empire came in 1922, when the last sultan, Mehmed VI, was deposed. The centuries-old institution of the Sultanate, which had once commanded the respect of a vast and diverse empire, was abolished, bringing a definitive end to the imperial lineage that had begun with Osman I. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a major European power for centuries, was now a shadow of its former self. Its armies were broken, its economy was in tatters, and its territories were in the hands of Allied forces. The signing of the Armistice of Mudros brought an end to the fighting, but it was followed by the imposition of a harsh treaty and the military occupation of Istanbul itself, a final and ultimate humiliation. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire for centuries, was now a fragmented and decentralized state that was struggling to maintain its power and influence. It was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to survive in a world that was rapidly changing. From the ashes of the collapsed empire, a new, secular and modern nation-state emerged under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal, now known as Ataturk, father of the Turks. His establishment of the Republic of Turkey was a radical departure from the Ottoman past, a complete reimagining of political and cultural identity that prioritized nation over empire. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a major European power for centuries, was now a shadow of its former self. Its armies were broken, its economy was in tatters, and its territories were in the hands of Allied forces. The signing of the Armistice of Mudros brought an end to the fighting, but it was followed by the imposition of a harsh treaty and the military occupation of Istanbul itself, a final and ultimate humiliation. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire for centuries, was now a fragmented and decentralized state that was struggling to maintain its power and influence. It was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to survive in a world that was rapidly changing. The historical legacy of the Ottoman Empire extends far beyond the borders of modern Turkey. Its centuries-long rule created a unique cultural synthesis in the Balkans, the Middle East, and North Africa, leaving behind a rich heritage of architecture, cuisine, and administrative traditions. The study of its rise and fall provides crucial insights into the complex interactions between military technology, religious tolerance, and the enduring power of political ambition, demonstrating how a small principality on the margins of civilization could become one of the greatest empires in human history. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a major European power for centuries, was now a shadow of its former self. Its armies were broken, its economy was in tatters, and its territories were in the hands of allied forces. The signing of the Armistice of Mudros brought an end to the fighting, but it was followed by the imposition of a harsh treaty and the military occupation of Istanbul itself, a final and ultimate humiliation. The Ottoman Empire, which had been a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire for centuries, was now a fragmented and decentralized state that was struggling to maintain its power and influence. It was a tragic and complex story, a story of a great empire that was struggling to survive in a world that was rapidly changing.